A question I had to ask myself last year before quitting my job with nothing lined up. A question I would strongly encourage you to ask yourself before making any sort of big or life-changing decision. What is enough? And if you're looking for a quick, snappy video, you're not going to get that from me. Because I'm a firm believer that the best way, honestly, the only way to really communicate a message that inspires change, a different way of thinking, of being, is through sharing a story. Your story. My relationship with enough goes way back, and it's a little complicated, we'll put it that way. It started with my parents, Chinese immigrants, who came to the US over 20 years ago in pursuit of the American dream, in pursuit of providing my older brother and I all the opportunities and privileges they didn't have growing up. The thing is, what you don't often realize when you come from scarcity, from having and feeling like less, is that when you pursue more, less is needed in other areas of life to balance out the scales, right? And you often don't realize where this less shows up, the sort of impact it has on those around you or even yourself, until way later in life. In the case of my parents, in pursuing more, less showed up in the form of time and energy. For two sons in the most formative years of their childhood, for themselves, and being able to take care of their own baggage, their own trauma that they inherited from their parents and brought with them to the US. I mean, they couldn't have predicted how this this form of scarcity would impact my brother and I. But in understanding myself and my experience growing up, this less showed up in the form of this deep, deep scarcity of emotional presence, of love and connection. It would ingrain in me this deep sense of unworthiness that I would carry for, gosh, like the first 21 years of my life. On the outside, I might have had enough, had the opportunities, had the privileges that not many people are fortunate to have. But deep down, I didn't feel like enough to be loved. As a kid, I tried to make up, to compensate for the scarcity I felt in my own life by striving for more. Striving for more in the only way I knew how, the only way I was shown how. I became a high achiever, just like my parents. A pretty convenient mask for anyone with deep insecurity and unworthiness to hide behind, especially when you're the son of immigrants, especially when you live in the US, a culture where high achievers and hard work are lauded and praised. Could not tell you this when I was younger, but in my mind, I guess I equated performance or externally validating metrics or qualifiers to being loved, to getting that connection I so desperately craved and needed. I did not remember this until I was coming up with all this, but when I was a kid, like third grade, so I was an artist. I painted, I drew, and I remember I definitely wasn't asked to do this. I must have mentioned it to my teacher that was an artist, and bringing in my entire art portfolio to class and displaying and showing all of my art to 20 some odd 8 or 9 year olds, and just getting those oohs, those ahs, and just how amazing it felt to get that attention, that validation. And that was just one example from my childhood, from 20, 21 years of my life. In honesty, it did give me the connection and love I was chasing, but it was conditional, right? It was conditional on me doing something, on me getting good grades, on me being this artist, on me, being able to, I don't know, get good grades, you name it. But in reality, the kind of love and connection I was searching for, the kind of love and connection deep down, all of us are searching for, is unconditional. It doesn't require performance. It doesn't require you to do anything, but just be yourself. By the time I had started to work through and understand my trauma and the impact it had on me, which is definitely deserving of its own video, that process, I had already graduated school, was already set to start my high-paying job in investment banking, which I can tell you now is just another example of me chasing validation, of trying to prove my worth as a human being. And it took me months of playing this balancing act, of questioning what I was doing with my life, of having more in certain areas and less in others, before I finally asked myself that question: what is enough? When I really sat down and answered that for myself truthfully, I realized I had more in the areas of life that make someone conventionally successful, wealth, status, prestige. The thing is, I grew up with all of these things, yet they never, never brought me a healthy relationship with my parents. They still haven't brought me a healthy relationship with my parents. They never taught me how to be happy, never taught me how to love myself. And I realized that what I had less of was time, energy for the areas of life that mattered most to me. The areas of life that I had spent 20, 21 years of my life relentlessly pursuing without knowing. Meaningful relationships, unconditional love and acceptance. So when it came down to making the decision to quit my job, to leave behind this pursuit, this path of more, I had to define what enough is to me. And when I think back to my answer then, and my answer now, a little over a year since I left all that behind, my answer really hasn't changed. It's simply having the time and energy for my health, so physically, mentally, spiritually, my purpose in life, and my relationships. Because if I'm not at my best, I'm not the most equipped to serve and fulfill my purpose. My purpose comes from how I show up in my relationships, the people I care about most in life. The sort of relationships that provide me so much joy and fulfillment. They provide me so much of that unconditional love and connection that I had been searching for so desperately as a young, immature kid. Areas of life that can't be bought. They can only be cultivated through quality time and presence. Life-changing decisions often involve hesitation, involve fear. This fear of losing someone or something deeply important to you. But if you ask yourself and you honestly answer, what is enough to me? And you break it down to the barest essentials, and you ensure that you live in a manner in which you have enough in those areas, then what is there to fear? Because when you have enough, you have nothing to lose.